So this is 1 o'clock local time in London, 1300 hours GMT in London, UK on Friday the 19th of March. And this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only online on the internet. And in today's lineup, or running order, as we may call them, we shall be discussing the Tower Hamlets Council's continuing contempt being shown to the schoolgirls. The council betrayed by Tower Hamlets Council, defying, neglecting to discharge its safeguarding children duties during the 6 calendar years that these children were being subjected to whatever they were subjected to before they were filmed crossing from Turkey into Syria in February 2015. So the name Shamima Begum is, of course, one name, but it is the name that has been most mentioned for two reasons. One is that she is the one that is involved in various reported legal kind of bids to be allowed to return home and to challenge Sajid Javid or the UK Home Office's illegal removal of her British citizenship by birth. That's one reason. The other reason is that, sadly, the other two schoolgirls who were reported to be with her in February 2015 are now widely believed to have died. And there is a fourth girl whose name we are still looking to confirm, who had left a year before, or a calendar year before the other three girls were photographed as having left in February 2015. So that other girl left in 2014. To all of those four girls, schoolgirls, Tower Hamlets as the local council owed safeguarding children duties. And safeguarding children duties did not include a limited number of listed duties. They implied, and they kind of would have implied and involved and entailed any number of duties, any number of tasks, that the actual task of safeguarding these children, these girls, would have necessitated and would have required the Tower Hamlets Council to undertake, carry out fully and continuously and significantly and substantially, and with dedication, so that none of these girls would have been put astray or put away or put kind of misled or misdirected, if you like, from their ordinary course of life. Now, as has happened, these four girls have been, except the remaining one who's Shamima Begum, who is still alive at least, the other three girls have in effect been kind of killed, or something similar to being killed has happened to each of them. And with the Shamima Begum, she has left no kind of doubt in the minds of people who have been aware of following her kind of statements, left no doubt as to her humanity. And her humanity immediately includes the fact that she has lost not one, not two, 3 children all of whom died, one after the other. And the fact that she had these children, while she has been herself a child, only adds to the trauma and the loss and the desperation and the desolation that this child, I mean, she's only out of childhood by 2 years now. If she's 21, she's only out of childhood by 2 years, just about. Now, these are details that are obviously kind of available publicly. What is not available publicly is the behavior of Hamlets Council, who in Hamlets Council throughout those 6 years decided that the duty that the council owed, safeguarding duties that the council owed to these children, could be neglected, could be ignored. Who decided that? We don't know that because nothing has been published about any decision that was made to neglect these duties and to abandon these children or to forget these children. In fact, as far as Hamlets Council is concerned, there is these children don't exist, never existed. Because we have been checking regularly the website, Hamlets Council's internet portal, the main website that contains all the individual kind of web publications and documents archived and active. And there is no reference to Shamima Begum. If you look up and if you search Shamima Begum, Begum is misleading because there are several other people who have the name Begum. So Begum produces results, but Shamima doesn't. So that means that as far as Hamlets Council is concerned, as of today, there has been no person called Shamima Begum or the other three girls. Because if the Hamlets Council was doing the duty, it was under legal obligation and duty to do, then there would be records of what action they took. Even if the decisions or proceedings of any meetings, any case conference or confidential investigation carried out because of security and safety reasons, the fact that the name Shamima Begum doesn't appear on the records shows that they didn't have any even subject. I mean, even if the contents, the details are confidential and covered by certain aspects of the law, including data protection laws, it doesn't stop the council or it doesn't stop the organization from including the name on the list of its archived materials, let's say. But there is no archive and there is no current, there is no active reference to Shamima Begum at all whatsoever. Just to make sure that we have not missed anything that they might have posted today, let's see what they have got. And it reads, we did the search, just entered Shamima. And it says search results, Shamima. Your search for Shamima returned 0 results. So this is just after 8 o'clock, 13:08 GMT on Friday the 19th of March 2021. And this is what the Hamlets Council's website is saying. So there are two kind of pieces of legislation that kind of are referable or citable in the context of safeguarding children. There used to be a thing called local safeguarding children boards. That was what was in place before the 2017 Children and Social Work Act 2017 came into being. So whatever the name, whatever the difference, the actual duty, the collected kind of listed emergency duties to safeguard children had existed even before 2017. And there is no reference to Shamima under any of those, under either two of those, in Hamlets Council's website. And one of the things that had existed before Shamima Begum and her fellow school friends entered the age of 10, because they were born in 1999, let's say, between 1998 and 1999. So in 2006, they would have been very much covered by the what is called things like, including multi-agency safeguarding hub and safeguarding resources for safeguarding vulnerable groups Act 2006. So what these safeguarding early years, safeguarding vulnerable groups, and then later the 2015, the Department for Education introduced the prevent duty in June 2015. So prevent is the one that is related to the prevent program created against especially Muslim radicals or radicalization under Muslim extremists, so-called, by the previous Brown-fronted government, and Hazel Blears. Hazel Blears was imposed as the equivalent kind of minister, equivalent to Eric Pickles, what is now Robert Jenrick's kind of portfolio, broadly speaking. What I'm saying is that there are literally dozens in place, dozens of regulations, statutory instruments, and guidelines, and have been in existence with increasing kind of frequency of reference to various vulnerabilities and definitions, updated in context and politically kind of refined to take into account what is kind of happening over the years. And under all of those, these girls were entitled to claim protection, safeguarding, support, care, attention. And they were deprived and denied of all of those. And that is what is evident in the fact that there is no reference to Shamima Begum. Well, there is no reference to Shamima in the council's website. So let's say what that actually means. Now, in the actual contents of the council's minutes, for example, the Khoodeelaar campaign is mentioned because it was the organization on whose behalf I articulated and advocated the questions. But on the general website, there is not any mention of Khoodeelaar. And I'm not mentioned there, although there is this Haq mentioned, but I'm not mentioned yet. In terms of documentation and the communications, I have made the highest number of communications recorded by various documentary communications modes and media and means over the last 50 years. And there is no mention of me in the main website. So it is possible that the council is kind of operating its archives and document access program by applying dishonesty that is prevalent in every kind of aspect of its behavior, including the behavior in neglecting that safeguarding children duties it owed to Shamima Begum. Now, in the last 24 hours, I have spoken to two kind of members of the community, the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets. And effectively, both of them have been either members of the Labour Party or have been very closely familiar with the behavior of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets. And our conversation has been about the campaign, any campaign, about stopping the corrupt elected mayor system. And there is a campaign going on, apparently, from the kind of area or the part of the population in Tower Hamlets that contains more or less the same type of people, the same groups of individuals who were key kind of promoters of the idea of a yes vote for the then referendum to decide whether there should be an elected mayor. That was, when I said then, meaning March, let's say, February, March 2010. February and March 2010 was about the kind of peak period for the propaganda that was run by anti-democratic elements that wanted to diminish the continuation of even the fragile form of democracy in Hamlets Council. And we opposed that. But our opposition, we did that in opposition in good faith and based entirely on the evidence that it would be a disaster to have an elected mayor imposed, foisted, whether through referendum, whether through voting, on Hamlets Council, because it would be completely unsuitable to the tradition and the history and the temperament and the capacity for auditing and holding to democratic audit and accountability the abuser imposed on the part of the people. And that has proven to be the right kind of outcome that we had warned against. And one of the things that happened when the elected mayor post was actually put in action in October 2010, and these girls were just about 10 years old. These girls, including Shamima Begum and the other three. And whatever later happened, whenever it happened between 2010 until February 2015. Remember what I'm saying, the time scale. And it was that period of 6 years in which the council should have actively engaged in doing everything that it needed to do, everything that had rationally had to be done in order to protect, safeguard means protect from damage, harm, detriment, whatever, these girls. So it should have started the monitoring and the special efforts program or programs must have begun or should have begun or should have been put in operation starting, let's say, October 2010, and should have been continued up to this period of 2015, 2016, 2017, when these girls were actually found to have left Tower Hamlets and gone to another country and put themselves open to risks beyond calculation, beyond anyone's grasp, to calculate, let alone to counter in any effective way, and protect these girls from the effects and consequences of those very serious activities. Now, we have asked our Hamlets Council repeatedly, and we have asked the councillors to account for the behavior of the Tower Hamlets Council in wider democratic accountability. And I have been the main person who has been put on the record a series of questions that nobody else has done. And it is on the record because you can't undo that record. That is, I've asked the question, let's say, picking this one at random. After the 2014, May 2014 council election, which was the time also when the so-called mayoral election took place. And we shall come to all of that in an updated form later in this part. I put the question and I asked the question formally. But although I put it in June or July, I had actually had to write it few months before. Let me explain why I had to write it few months before. I can write, as it is obvious from this broadcast, I can write anything within few minutes. I don't need any longer time than few minutes to write a question like the one that I actually put to Tower Hamlets Council, but I had to write it months in advance because the council operates a completely dark ageist obstruction, making it impossible for people to come across from the community. Those who are not elected councillors or elected mayor or one of their stooges corruptly co-opted to many of these so-called bogus committees, as difficult and as impossible as they can make it, so that real life events and issues and questions and demands cannot be put to the council, which is supposed to be the servant of the community, democratic servant. So they make it a condition months ago. And the other thing is that they need you to get another 30 people to sign it. Anyone who knows Tower Hamlets, anyone who knows Newhams, let's say, would know that these are not, it is a fact, these are not in cultural terms very literate, politically literate populations. People may have technical literacy. That does not translate to political literacy. So look up the difference and you can see what I'm meaning. And for somebody like me who is very well known, asking anyone to sign a petition, it is a very negative experience, because people think that because of my high profile political action, I may get them involved in trouble, that they can't handle or they don't want to get involved in. That is to say, I'll be doing risky things like confronting, challenging the authorities and whatever with their signature. So while a signature may look like 30 signatures, but it's actually very difficult for that reason. Now in the lockdown, it is almost impossible. Anyways, I did manage to get those signatures on the petition. It's not a petition, it was a question on that occasion. Let me just get hold of that one. And we shall do the contextual updating on Shamima Begum and the safeguarding duties, how the council actually neglected and broke the law in breaking the law on safeguarding the children duties. So this is the question that I had put. I presented it in July, but actually I had to write it in April. Even before the May 2014 election was held. I did this on the 30th of July. Look at this one. So what is it saying? To the full council meeting.
Hello, Internet. At Pizza Hut, we get asked, do you...
Oh, shit. This is the advertisement.
You gave us her phone number.
This is my question. It's full of 4 GMT on Wednesday, the 24th of September 2014. This is a brief introduction, contextually, recording and publishing the constitutional, democratic, ethical, social and sociological question that I put to the full council meeting of Hamlets Council on 30th of July 2014. In the context of all the news, commentary, this is of relevance and will be commented on and updated later. This is my question. The text is written there, and I read this out slowly.
And culture for written response on any outstanding matter within 28 days.
Thank you. Agenda item 6 is questions from members of the public. Each questioner may put one supplementary question arising directly from the question or the response. And there's a maximum of 20 minutes in total for the public questions. Any questions not reached within that time will receive a written reply. 8 questions listed in the agenda, and the first question is from Mr. Mohammed Hock.
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum. I extend happy Eid Mubarak to everyone who has fasted or not fasted, because spend the time in contemplation or not, but this is a solidarity statement for humanity, universal message of tolerance and respect. And with that introduction, I would say that this is something that I didn't know about, the context of, like my colleague here, concerned about Brick Lane. When I put this question at the start of June, I didn't know about Brick Lane or the concern that would be presented here. And it just comes 41 years ago, I had a group of students that defended the community in Brick Lane. And I'm glad to say that one of the students is present here, and his name is Abdul Mukid Chunu. And I am pleased to say that the continuation of the defense of the community is consistent with the spirit of tolerance that we want to see extended across Tawa Hamlets. And on that basis, I would say that this question is not critical. It is not intended to embarrass anybody, but to encompass the spirit of tolerance and solidarity. So I would expect in the coming year, the answer shouldn't be necessarily expected here in this minute. But this is the spirit, and I would read this out to those who have not seen the copy. What motivated the candidates at the 22nd of May 2014 election to seek election to Tawa Hamlets, and what are the ethical, democratic, accountable actions that current councillors and Tawa Hamlets Council are most content about, and what actions they are not content about, and what are the councillors doing to make all their actions accountable, ethical, transparent, and relevant to and representative of the daily lives, needs, expectations of ordinary people of all backgrounds in the London Borough of Tawa Hamlets. Thank you, sir. May I call upon the executive member, Councillor Oliu Rahman, to respond to this?
Thank you, Mr. Hawk. Before I move to my answer, may I take a couple seconds to say a few words? I have seen you actually while I was growing up, living in Bricklane, the work that you have done for the community, and on behalf of the community, the campaigns, some of the campaigns that you have led. And I'm very pleased even now that you are still determined to do just for the residents of Tawa Hamlets. And I am sure that you have certainly motivated many young generation in the past, and I'm sure you will motivate many young generation in the future with your work and the commitment that you show for the communities in Tawa Hamlets, regardless of their race, religion, or whatever background that they come from. So I want to pay my gratitude and thanks to you for the work that you do. Can I now move to your question and answer as best as I can, obviously within the time limit? I cannot speak for everyone here, but I'm confident that their motivation for being a councillor are same as mine and Mayor Lutfur Rahman. We want to make Tawa Hamlets a better place to live and work. We want to ensure residents from all background have the strongest voice and representation in this council and outside this council too.
Now, I was obviously asked to comment in response to what Oliu Rahman said, but I'm not going to play that bit because we come back to what Oliu Rahman said, that they wanted to serve the borough and make the borough as good as better for everyone. I'm not commenting on what he said about me because I've been doing it for all this time, and it continues. Even this day, I'm continuing to do what Oliu Rahman there referred to, and I don't do it as a career. I'm doing it as a complete and absolute universal service for the defense of the highest possible values of accountability and democracy and ethics and morality and universality. And because I do that, I am very perturbed and disturbed by the fact that Lutfur Rahman and whoever these people are that are kind of with him now, putting forward the line that Lutfur Rahman, while he was in post, incumbent as the so-called elected mayor during those 6 calendar years, let's say, October 2010, then 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. So Lutfur Rahman is saying, or his kind of people who are still with him are saying that Lutfur Rahman did no wrong while he was in post. Whether I believe the argument for that post at all is not relevant to this discussion, because we are discussing what those who actually believed in the post, say about what Lutfur Rahman and his duty or duties were, because he was in post, and by definition he was under the duty and the obligation to do the safeguarding children duties. What safeguarding children duties did Lutfur Rahman do? Did he do those duties to Shamima Begum? If he did, when did he do those? And what actions did he do? Did anybody else present on the council, Hamlets Council, during those 6 calendar years, did anyone notice what Hamlets Council and its incumbent elected mayor was doing to safeguard Shamima Begum and the other children? Okay, the names of those children may not be known because of security and safety reasons and operational reasons. I understand that. But did anyone know that a group of girls or school children were at the gravest of danger of being led astray, misled, and put at grave risk about their life and livelihoods and safety and everything? Did any program exist to safeguard these children, these particular children? If it did, what was it? When was it? Where was it? How was it? Who actually kind of were the individuals that manned and womaned this activity? Because whatever the activity, any safeguarding children duties involving that kind of detailed kind of issues that necessarily arose from these girls, these children being targeted or involved in a series of diversionary pursuits or diversionary engagements, would have necessarily required the involvement of not one or two, at least a dozen persons, in my understanding of human communication, organization, and discipline and line management. So what was or were the safeguarding children projects and programs that Tower Hamlets Council under the executive mayor Lutfur Rahman did? I've been asking this for days now. There has been no answer. There cannot be any answer for the simple reason that they were not doing anything. And it is our campaign that has started immediately after the 26th of February 2001, rubber stamping ruling against Shamima Begum, delivered by the plastic body of the Supreme Court, and as was read online on the video by the man who is supposedly the president of the Supreme Court, man called Reed, R-E-E-D. He misread this misconceived script, totally racist script. But at this moment, that is only a consequence. What the Supreme Court did, what Sajid Javid did and others did against these girls and are doing against these girls are only consequences that should have been kind of known to the Hamlets Council that neglected those duties and didn't know the consequences or didn't care about the consequences. So what is going on? Is Tower Hamlets Council, the local council, democratic elected council, entitled to just deny its responsibilities, even when the denial directly causes destruction of children's lives? And by direct implication and extrapolation, the destruction of these children's immediate families, the parents and siblings or whatever. And who is going to answer these questions? No councillor has come online. No councillor has come on the record to say anything. And nobody has come to say anything even off the records. Since I began the campaign on the 26th of February 2021 in this particular mode, I have been talking about Shamima Begum and the council's duties, but I was not launching a formal campaign because there were several things that had to be gone through, including what happened on the 26th of February with the High Court, with the Supreme Court giving the rubber stamp decision, the ruling against Shamima Begum. There had to be something definitive like that before I could start the campaign, for simple procedural reasons, constitutional law reasons. Because if I had started the campaign, what I'm doing now, before that ruling, then I would have been open to question as to, did I kind of give the existing court system the benefit of the doubt and the scope to do their job? Because if I didn't kind of give them that opportunity, then they could blame me for distorting the public perception and so on about what were the right things and what were the wrong things and so on. So I had to wait for that reason, not because I didn't know that I could start the campaign. I could foresee and I could foretell the rubber stamp role that the Supreme Court would play and did play. I could have foreseen that. But objectively speaking, if I started the campaign and if I had accused the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, whichever way they ruled, in advance of the ruling, then I could be accused of having interfered in the court process or due process. So that's a procedural decision that explains the reason why I didn't start the campaign until the 26th of February 2021. Now that that rubber stamping has been done and the Tower Hamlets Council has been given opportunities every week since then, and it has not issued any statement as to what it did and has not issued any statement as to what it didn't do and why it didn't do anything. Essentially, Tower Hamlets Council has treated these schoolgirls, these school children, already as aliens, as if they were not British citizens, as if they were not in the country, as if they were not in Tower Hamlets. What Sajid Javid did by taking away the British citizenship from Shamima Begum, Tower Hamlets Council did even before all of that happened. And Tower Hamlets Council did by creating the ground and the atmosphere and the processes and the channels to go on, channels of communication, the illicit communication, the illegal communication, the dangerous communications to take place between Shamima Begum and her other friends on the one hand, and the kind of elements that had targeted them from wherever they did. And the wider kind of comparison that I have to make today, topically, with Shamima Begum, in terms of destruction of lives. If the authority, local authority, for example, the Waltham Forest Council, or the Newham Council, or Barking and Dagenham Council, because the murder of this student at first year law student at the School of Oriental and African Studies, that is based in Central London, but this boy was at home in Leighton last Wednesday, 2 days ago, where he and his mother were attacked and stabbed, and the stabbing attack killed him. His mother survived, but what extent she suffered the kind of injuries is not known to me at this stage. But this is the most likely example in the conversation that is going on now, and the broadcast that we are making now about safeguarding children duties owed by the local councils. Let me say this. By all the conventional definitions, I'm a kind of what is called kind of talented individual or multi-disciplined person. I have been for a very long time. So I'm an educationist in the conventionally defined sense, and I'm also an educationist in the ethical, moral, original, educationally defined sense of the term. So I've been involved in education at every level, very long time. And in my experience of education and of society, education is not technology. Technology and techniques are skills, crafts. Education is bigger than that, and education is morality, ethics, compassion, justice, enlightenment. These combined are education. And education, although it is called, various decision-making agencies, bureaucracies, use the term education or educational to describe their activities. They are not really describing education. They're misusing the concept of education. For example, the very significantly high incidence of gun crime and knife crime in London. Whenever a person is a victim of knife crime or gun crime, this one is included, but not in this article in the Times, but in the majority of the tabloids and majority of the mainstream so-called media. The knee-jerk kind of reaction is to ask the police, Home Office, and so on to do something about it, to stop these attacks and violence. The schools are not doing their job clearly, and we shall discuss the schools as a dedicated kind of discussion. Schools are not doing it, the councils are not doing it, and other powers, including parliament and government, are not doing it. And the police most emphatically are not doing it. And these crimes being committed mainly by young people, these crimes are being committed by adults behind them, if you like. Because adults at every level are conspiring to do vile things on their foes or rivals or whatever. And the children, anyone under 19 is a child, are doing the same. And the reason why they keep doing it, despite the temporary outrage, in the hours immediately following such atrocities is because the adult population and the adult posts holders at various levels in schools, in councils, and other places, in the police, in the Crown Prosecution Service, in the courts, are complacent. And also they are irresponsible. And they're detached from their social kind of engagement, the social commitment and duties. So this child, well, he's a first year student, degree student, doing law at the School of Oriental and African Studies in central London. So he and his mother were attacked in their home. Shortly after an advertisement was placed by them about a particular designer clothes that they were making at home and selling from home online, with online kind of promotions and advertising. And this murderer arrived to murder them, rob them at whatever cost, whatever the price. This murderer wasn't prepared to pay the price. So he was robbing them and they resisted. And both this victim, Hussain Chaudhry, and his mom were stabbed fatally. He was fatally stabbed and his mom was near fatally stabbed. So what I'm saying is that where did that murderer and killer get the idea that he could do that? He could do so much as to even go into his victim's home. I mean, no place is sacrosanct, no place is safe. No place is sacred and beyond the reach of the murderer, criminal in London. Whatever gave him the series of confidence that he must have asserted and the kind of resolution to go and murder these people just for the sake of this clothing, whatever the clothing. So there comes the question of education. If when in the childhood a child is exposed to ideas that are educational, enlightening, not education in the sense of picking up a kind of craft or a skill, that's not education. There's a skill and a craft, and you don't need education for that. Most of humanity doesn't need education for learning skills and crafts. But for education, you need a wider devotion of the mind and the heart and the soul, real enlightenment about humanity. And what has happened in the British schools, I shall come to Thomas Babington Macaulay and his corruption of education in later parts as an update. The British schools are not educational institutions. These are kind of factories for creating criminals. Say, for example, Harrow and Eton. These are two of the most widely quoted British schools, British educational establishments. Because Winston Churchill apparently went to Harrow. Whether he went to Harrow or whether he went to Eton makes no difference, because both of them almost always quoted and mentioned together. And it is a boastful quote or mention. It's not a regretful boast or mention. And the far rightward move in this culture, in this society, that is underway, that we are talking at a time when the country is being swept by far right-wing ideas and ideologies, and increasing attacks of all the enlightening institutions and agencies that were begun to be established from the founding years of the United Nations in the late 1940s. We are witnessing in Britain a retreat from all the limited enlightenments that took place because the trauma and the shock of the kind of losses of lives and the dangers and the ordeals that people suffered as brought on by the Second European War, 1939-45. These were as traumatic and traumatizing to people in Britain as they were in the rest of the Western world, where every nation kind of went through the trauma. Germany is a different case, but apart from Germany, most of the other countries were very much traumatized. And that is why the founding declarations of the United Nations says that they will not. This is the idea behind the founding of the United Nations was to avoid such a kind of tragedy or series of tragedies occurring again. That's a very, very enlightening and very ethical and very moral kind of purpose for which the United Nations was established. But as we have said, since the establishment of the idea, let's say launching of the idea of the United Nations, most of the ideas were abandoned they were not kind of be pushed forward into implementation by the signatory founding member states. The result is the continuation of the Security Council. The Security Council is a special club that excludes all the members and is not accountable to anybody. So the United Nations organization still has those founding values, founding words, but those words have been suffocated. They have not been allowed to be implemented and expressed. Thus, the United Nations, although founded for peace, founded for enlightenment, founded for equality, founded for justice, most of the aims have been sabotaged and frustrated by the forces that support the darkness, support the lack of enlightenment, support the racism, support the misogyny, women being violated, children being violated, and black people being violated, starved, massacred, genocided. So what has happened in the country like Britain, which had a unique record of the last 300 years. 500 years is true, but the 300 years were the most kind of oppressive centuries for British oppression against millions, hundreds of millions of people in the kind of occupied colonies, if you like. And so Britain had an advantage because it had looted so much resource and wealth from the colonized countries that its infrastructure, logistics were equipped with more skills, much more skills than any comparable country with the comparable size of the demography. And yet, when the country became like free moving, standalone after the empires, which happened coincidentally almost around the same time as the founding of the United Nations organization. So the United Kingdom, although it was equipped with capacity, intellectual capacity, archival capacity, and all the rest of it, it lacked interest and propensity to establish education. So from the 1940s onwards, late 40s onwards, there has been continuing and worsening disengagement from the essential duty to educate. Remember safeguarding child duties and duties to educate, what I'm saying. So the duties to educate have included the duties to treat each other with respect and transparency, and transparent respect and dignity. These have been absent from the actual behavior of the people in power, people in making decisions affecting other people. So people in power have included people in schools. So anyone who reads the actual literature about school policies and school governance and school administration and school remits, let's say of the last 70 years, will find that democracy, accountability, civic respect and responsibility, respect for the other people, fraternity, equality, and morality, these are concepts that have not been present in the proceedings of the schools and the related bodies and associations. And similarly, the reading of the actual theories, the so-called education theories, or English educational theories, have been totally, absolutely going backwards to the Dark Ages. It's increasingly complicated by the over proliferation of irrelevant diversions from the actual enlightenment. Any kind of excuses have been built into the narrative, so that schools have not been open to be audited by the subjects, either by the students or by the parents or the guardians, let alone by the community. Remember what I've said now here. This is what the entire library collection on the subject that you can find in the Library at Oxford, Bodleian Library, or you can find in the British Library based now in Euston. And if you look at the actual contents of Fleet Street, as previously housed in the Colindale newspaper library, now part of the British Museum, you cannot find education as the key factor dominating the narrative in the schools, about the schools, in the colleges, in the education departments in the universities, and most certainly not in the coverage of schools and colleges as done by Fleet Street, either this week, this year, today, or in the last 70 years. So this child who has been murdered, now look at the kind of various conflicting factors here. This is a student of law at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, S-O-A-S, which is part of the University of London. The Times calls it the SOAS University. Now imagine the lack of basic knowledge. The Times report says a college is a university, which it is not. So, despite the fact that the British, as Thomas Babington Macaulay, boasted it would be, boasted in the 19th century. He boasted in the 1830s that English would be taught to people in the subcontinent who were brown skinned, he said. And they would be on the outside brown and on the inside English. Now these murderers, if there were more than one murderer of this child, obviously have been through the English school system. Whether they dropped out or not doesn't matter. Because the murderers of the Bangladeshi boy Ajmal Ahmad in 2013 in the Langdon Park school area in Poplar were almost his classmates, and they were of the same age group as he was, and they committed the murder shortly after he took the public exam, whatever it was whether the GCSE or A levels, because the kind of sadness caused by the murder was made even worse, deeper, because his exam results were very good. And that was a factor that everyone mentioned with increased sadness when the results came out, not long after he was murdered. So what were they kind of writing in the papers, and what were they reading? What were they being taught about? In the context of the victims being, or the perpetrators and the victims being of African origin, let's say what the Metropolitan Police has been calling black on black violence. If the murderers and the killers are of the same background as the victim or victims, then where do they get this idea that they have to or they can murder somebody of that kind of background in a country like this? Where do they get that idea? I mean, physical violence is an understandable human kind of activity. But to go and murder somebody, as happened with Hussain Chowdhury's murder, because the murderer wanted to take away the designer clothes from the victim's house. What does it say? Would the murderer go to a white person's house and murder the white person in that same way? It's not my opinion, it's my kind of narrative based on the evidence of the facts and the contents of the reports, and the 90% plus murders of black people or of African people or of Asian people that take place in places like London or Birmingham the murders are committed by other black people or other African or Asian people. How did that happen? How did that happen? How did that situation appear? What went on in the years before that? What caused it? And the question, what caused it, is a question of education. Investigate, find out the motivation. And what are the factors that contributed to that kind of mentality being produced in the mind of the actual perpetrators? And before they leave the school gates, what education, if any, is being offered to these teenage, mainly boys, but not all exclusively boys, but mainly majority boys. What, if any, education is given to them? Say, for example, there has been, for a long time, this periodic claim that in Britain, not enough kind of posts in schools are given to black or Asian people. I mean, there is a perverted name called BAME. Now, suppose there are schools which have got large numbers of black and African Asian children, and the number of people on the staff is significant. Let's say 60%, let's say, on the staff, I would say. So, what are the interactions and what are the educational values? That is to say, what principles are imparted to these children by the school as a whole? What culture is advocated and advanced by that school to those children while they are engaged and in contact with the school? And the evidence shows that there is nothing of education or educational value that the schools are teaching these children or kind of emphasizing strongly enough to these children for the children to take real account of these values. And the result is that the perpetrators of knife crime, gun crime, and other crimes against these victims who are mainly African Asian, and the second largest number is Asian, in places like London, Manchester, and Birmingham. These are, and Cardiff, let's say. How did this thing happen? How are these crimes being encouraged? Or how do these young persons think that murdering anyone is just the done thing? If that is the case, then education, which should be about life, supporting life at every level, in every demonstration, in every quality, that life is being denied by the perpetrators themselves. And that is what they're literally doing when they're taking somebody else's life. So, education has not been available in Tower Hamlets, in the schools. And the safeguarding children duties that would have been otherwise the ideal kind of package to protect and save lives under the moral and educational leadership initiative, an example of the Tower Hamlets Local Council, that was not available, and was certainly not available to these children, these girls, Shamima Begum and her school friends. What we have in the kind of pursuit for the evidence of what the council did, if it did anything, we have not found anything that actually shows an interconnection between things that are educational within the council's framework itself. For example, in the behavior of the mayor, elected mayor, say as evident in the course of that meeting on the 30th of July 2014, where I presented this question. Apart from Oliver Roman giving that answer, Ali Rahman, of course, gave that answer on behalf of Luthu Rahman, although he didn't say he was replying on behalf of Luthu Rahman. He said that he could assure me that he himself and Luthu Rahman were motivated to serve the community. You heard it there because I played it. But the behavior of Luthu Rahman in relation to Shamima Begum and the others betrays that, contradicts that hopeful kind of statement made by Oliver Rahman. Because Luthu Rahman has been saying, after all these betrayals of Shamima Begum and others that took place without any doubt during his incumbency in post as the so-called elected mayor, he's saying he did nothing wrong. So that raises the question, what is wrong? What is called wrong and what is called right? And what is his duty as the person in post as the elected mayor? We shall be seeking definitions and explanations to those things in due course, because this is a serious issue and serious series of issues. So I asked the question on the 30th of July 2014. And I also asked questions on other dates, just to make sure that I'm not kind of making a random sort of comment. I have been the only person in Tower Hamlets who has been monitoring and auditing Tower Hamlets Council's behavior since before the council got lumbered with the corrupt post of elected mayor. Think about what I'm saying there. Here is the full record of the question that I put to them, and mine was the first question, 6.1, the first of the questions under 8 public questions have been submitted as set out below. And my question reads, and I'm going to read this whole as it reads and appears on the website. What motivated candidates at the 22nd of May 2014 election to seek election to Tower Hamlets Council? And what are the ethical, democratic, accountable actions that current councillors on Tower Hamlets Council are more content about, and what actions they are not content about, and what are the councillors doing to make all their actions accountable, ethical, transparent, and relevant to a representative of the daily lives, needs, expectations of ordinary people of all backgrounds in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. That is my question. And that question has not been answered to this day. It is now 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's 7 calendar years since I put this question to the Tower Hamlets Council when Lutfur Rahman was sitting to the right of the speaker, and he was sitting there as the mayor of the elected council. So he didn't ask any question, remember, because as the Conservative MP Robert Neil in January 2013 had revealed, Lutfur Rahman refused to speak at councils because he feared that if he spoke, his human rights would be attacked or violated. I mean, how does that go? How does that go? Because he was in a post which was supposedly elected by a group of Democrats in all of London, democratic councils, representing democratic councils all around the capital of London. So he, that is Lutfur Rahman, chose somebody, whoever it was, and he chose Oliver Rahman to speak on his behalf, because if he himself spoke, his human rights would be breached. So he chose Oliver Rahman. And although Oliver Rahman appeared fully respectful to me and kind of paid his respects and gratitude to me for my work, he didn't actually go into the motivation, especially about the requirements of ethics, morality, etc., on the part of the councillors, not me. My record doesn't need any qualification or praise, but theirs does. So where was anyone else on the council at that time after Oliver Rahman? Because Oliver Rahman only made a partial speech. What about the others? What did they have to say about the questions? Even if they didn't want to say thank you for all the work that had benefited them individually and collectively for decades. I mean, what motivated them to become a councillor? What motivated them to become a councillor? That is something that would have answered the other questions. So we shall be continuing with all of those examinations and seek the answers.